On paper, the S20 looks amazing, but so last year's Galaxy S10 line brought a lot of awesome features to the market, but maybe it wasn't the home run a lot of folks were expecting. Flash forward to the S20, and there's a lot that has been brought to the smartphone world, but let's take the high end, the $1,400 behemoth, the S20 Ultra, and compare it to last year's flagship. When you put these two phones head to head, at minimum there's a $600 difference. Are you getting that much value with the Ultra, or are you better off saving your money? The Galaxy S10 line was a new design language for Samsung. And the S10 Plus brought a lot of really cool things. So first, in the top, you had a hole punch notch on the right side. You had two camera sensors that were in there, ultrasonic fingerprint sensor down below. We didn't know it was gonna be the last of Samsung's flagships to have that headphone jack. Screens that kind of waterfall over and flow into the side, really thin bezels, all made of glass. It is a beautiful looking phone. The S20 Ultra continues that design language. It removes the headphone jack, probably to the surprise of nobody since we saw it get taken out with the Note 10 line. It rearranges the camera from horizontal to vertical, kind of stacks them a little bit differently, but the phones feel very similar from an aesthetic standpoint. What's different when you hold the Ultra is the thickness and the sheer weight and mass of the phone. So we've seen other devices that are 6.9 inches, but very rarely do you see a 6.9 inch phone with that many camera sensors, with that big sensors, and with that big a battery at 5,000 milliamp hours. All those things have to fit in somewhere. So you're left with a phone that is beautiful to look at and really premium to hold, but one that is very big in the hand. And as somebody who typically opts for the larger versions of devices, this is one that felt almost too big to me, which was surprising. It's only 0.1 inches bigger than the Note 10 Plus, a device that I've been using and really loved. But if you're on the fence about larger phones and bigger phones, maybe you have smaller hands, I would recommend looking at the 10 Plus first and then holding the Ultra in your hand, because you might find this device to be just too big. So the Ultra is obviously the flagship here, the biggest, most expensive of the S20 line, but the S20 and the S20 Plus are really capable phones in their own right. What I really like that Samsung did is every phone is 5G capable. And a lot of the awesomeness of the Ultra is true for the entire S20 line. 120 hertz refresh rate, the improved ultrasonic fingerprint sensor, Snapdragon 865. They all have the smaller camera cutout centralized in the middle like we saw on the Note 10 Plus, the same really thin, tiny bezels on the top and bottom, and they all have the really premium feel that you get in the Ultra across any of the S20 or the S20 Plus line. If you look at just the entry-level S20 coming in at $1,000, you're only getting support for sub-6 5G. If you opt for the Plus or the Ultra, you are getting both flavors of 5G. So obviously the Ultra's got the beast mode camera, but the Plus and the regular S20 have really good camera systems. So you're getting a 12 megapixel kind of regular camera, a 64 megapixel telephoto, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide. S20 is about $1,000, the Plus jumps up to $1,200, and the Ultra is $1,400. So Samsung is playing in very expensive water, especially at $1,400. These phones have to be perfect in almost every way. These are expensive phones coming in at $1,000. And true story, when we were at the briefing for these, we saw an S20 Ultra fall about 3.5 feet onto the floor, and you could really feel the air get sucked out of the room. You want to protect your investment in your phone. And I want to give a big thank you to this video's two sponsors. We've got Invisible Shield for the screen and Gear 4 to protect the back and the body of your phone. So Invisible Shield is the #1 screen protector for a reason. So it's got what's called Ultra Vision Guard Plus, and what that means, it's a blue light filter and an antimicrobial layer. It'll keep your screen protected from cracks and scratches, and it'll keep your investment looking good. But there's more to your phone than just the screen, and that's what Gear 4 is. It's the #1 selling case manufacturer in the UK. Different styles to pick what suits your needs. Whichever one you pick, they're all using this material called D3O. It's the most advanced impact protection material in the world. And when you're talking about glass versus concrete, that impact protection is really important. So if you're interested in the Invisible Shield Ultra Vision Guard Plus or any of the Gear 4 cases, and you should, to protect your phone, we'll link to them down below. They'll also be available at your local Verizon store. It is not an understatement nowadays to say Samsung makes the best displays on the market. And you expect that to be true with the S20 line. And that's not to say the display on the S10 Plus is bad, because it still looks amazing. But the Ultra's got a few tricks up its sleeve. So they've skipped 90 Hz refresh, and they've gone from 60 on the 10 Plus all the way up to 120 Hz, which is awesome. It makes things look and feel faster, and the touch response of your finger is 240 Hz. Things just appear to move smoother on the S20 Ultra. But again, there's a catch. The display goes up to QHD+, but when you go to QHD+, you can't use that 120 Hz display. You have to default back to 60. If you go to full HD, you can take advantage of 120 Hz, which I think is probably where I would go. It'll use a bit more battery, but things look really smooth. Now I think the question here is, they'll look smooth for the first couple days, but afterwards, if that's your only phone you're using, are you even gonna notice the smoother refresh? So if you're the kind of person that doesn't really tweak your phones or spend that much time going to settings and customizing it how you want, you should know that the S20 Ultra and really any of the S20s ship out of the box with just 60 Hz refresh. So if you wanna get that 120, you have to go into settings and display and turn it on there. So it's gonna be up to you if you wanna make that sacrifice for battery life or sort of optimized, have higher resolution, lower refresh rate. At least you have options here on the S10 Plus. You're stuck at 60 Hz, but you can take that 60 Hz all the way up to the max resolution. If you wanna nitpick and find differences, you can look at it with the hole punch for the camera. So the S10 line has those two sensors off to the right, whereas the S20 Ultra adopted what they did with the Note 10 line. They have a single camera sensor right in the middle. Honestly, neither bothered me at all. I've gotten so used to hole punches that I don't see them anymore. It disappears for me when I'm in content. I don't have any preference on the center or the right. If you have one, then pick the phone where you like it better. But don't let the placement of the middle at least deter you from looking at the S20 Ultra line. In all honesty, you hardly notice it. So, but the S20 Ultra, the reason it's so ultra and what Samsung is trying to sell you on at that $1,400 price is dem cameras. So they do bring the heat in the megapixel department. So this now has a quad camera system. It's got a 108 megapixel main shooter, a 48 megapixel telephoto, 12 megapixel ultra wide, and the fourth one is for time of flight. So the S10 cameras are no slouch either. You've got a 12 megapixel regular shooter, you've got a 12 megapixel telephoto, and a 16 megapixel ultra wide in here. But the big story, why there's an ultra at all, is that other sensor down below that the Plus and the S20 don't have. That crazy sensor that can do 100 times zoom. And you're probably thinking, much like I was, 100 times digital zoom is going to look like pixelated diarrhea garbage. And also, how can that be stabilized? If I move my hand even a little bit, zoomed in 100 times, it's gonna look like a full-on earthquake. To both of those, I'm gonna tell you, I don't know how they did it. I'm guessing a lot of AI and like a dash of magic. But when I zoomed in to 100 times, you could tell it was certainly zoomed, but it did look surprisingly good, and these were in less than ideal settings. It's a lot of software wizardry, but it's one that was really nice to have. But this is a Versus, right? So what's the difference? Obviously on paper, the difference is like North Pole, South Pole size, but what is it gonna be actually when you're looking at these photos on your phone or online? So here's some shots from the S20 Ultra. You can very clearly see how good these camera sensors are. You can see the detail, you can see the Samsung processing. The sky looks blue, the grass looks green. Shadows, I think, are done pretty close to perfectly. Dynamic range is captured really well. Here's a shot that we did a little bit of zoom on at 2x zoom. You can see again, there's no loss of resolution. Things look absolutely amazing, right? Except those shots were actually taken with the camera from the Galaxy S10 Plus. So the one caveat when it comes to this Versus is that the software we tested the S20 Ultra on wasn't finished. So they wouldn't let us take the camera samples with us that we shot. The story of these cameras is not just sheer megapixelage or even processing horsepower. The cameras on the S10 Plus are really amazing set of sensors, and Samsung software has continued to get better. The big versus here though is going to come down to the zoom. How much do you need that 10 times optical? How much do you want that 100 times digital? Is that worth the price for you? But where there is a big difference though is on video. What I really like that Samsung did is every phone can not only shoot at 8K, and shoot at 8K 24. The S10 Plus is again no slouch on the video front. You can shoot 4K 60. The video tends to look really good. Their stabilization is awesome. And chances are you're not gonna have a way to really view back that 8K footage anyway. But again, like the story with the zoom, if that's something you might want to have, maybe you're gonna invest in an 8K TV, you just want the most amount of Ks on your phone, well then that answer for you is gonna be pretty clear. So it always makes me laugh every year when these processor manufacturers get up on stage and like, this is our most powerful processor ever. And you're like, yeah, of course it is. You've had 12 months to make this version better and faster. And that's the same story with the S10 Plus versus the S20 Ultra. It's the 855 Snapdragon versus Snapdragon 865. And there are pretty significant differences here. A lot of differences you'll see are in the cameras and what it can do. That's where that 8K comes from. That might not be a difference maker for you, but it is nice to have. There's huge performance increases as well, but they might not be things that you see every day. One of the big changes though, and where you might see the difference between the two of the processors, 865 is much more efficient on the battery front. And you're going to need that with the S20 if you want to push it to everything it can do. So the S10 Plus, very capable phone, maxes out, at least on the data side, at LTE, and you get pretty good battery life out of its 4,500 milliamp hour battery. That's a large battery for a phone of that size. When you jump over to the Ultra though, you're now getting a 5,000 milliamp hour battery. And the phone is very thick because of it. But if you're using 120 hertz display and you're connected to 5G, you're going to drain battery very quickly, and you're going to need those 865 improvements to get better battery life. I was very surprised when I was testing out the second generation now ultrasonic fingerprint reader on the S20 Ultra. They moved it up a little bit so it's a little easier to put your thumb on just based on location from where you're holding it. But it was not only fast, but it worked 100% of the time in my test. And I didn't have to press it and hold it. It was a real quick tap. It was probably the best of the fingerprint readers that I have ever used, ultrasonic or just built into the back like the old generation phones. I give Samsung and Qualcomm, whoever made this work, a ton of credit. It might make me not miss sort of a Face ID type authentication a little bit less, knowing the ultrasonic reader this generation is that good. All right, so this is a pretty intense versus. These are really good phones, but a winner has to be declared here. And you look at both of these two side by side, there's a huge gap on price. I like that Samsung is keeping the S10 line alive and slashing 150 bucks off that price. I don't like how expensive the S20 Ultra is, and there'll be a ton of sales going on, I'm sure, on both phones, but you're looking at about a $600 price difference. And when I go through and look at my phone and how often I use it, how often I'm unlocking my phone, how often I'm holding it and taking pictures with it, it is quite a bit. So perhaps it might not be a surprise, but out of these two, I'm gonna opt to spend the extra money and go for the S20 Ultra. But I think in this versus, there's a dark horse, a candidate that has only been mentioned sparingly that might actually be the most perfect phone to get when you're looking to perhaps upgrade or get something new. I think the S20 Plus might actually be the best buy out of the entire line. Not only is it $200 cheaper than the Ultra, the 6.7-inch screen felt perfect in my hand. You get all the 5G benefits that you get of the Ultra. You're still getting that 30 times digital zoom. You're getting a 3 times optical zoom. You're getting close to the best of the Ultra, save for that crazy camera, and a form factor that's more pocketable, that's more palatable, and I think is probably gonna be more budget friendly for most people.